support from any number of civic or religious organizations.
Committee will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Colazar.
Here.
Representatives Churches.
Present.
Shannon.
Present.
Weiss.
Here.
Glanville.
Present.
Conlon.
Present.
Edwards.
Here.
Wagella.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Markinen. Paquette. Wenzel.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Shannon moves to approve the minutes of the March 5th committee without objection, so ordered. I would like to start off today by thanking Dr. Livernois, Principal Miller, and staff of Warren Consolidated Schools, committee staff, sergeants, local police who have made tonight's committee hearing possible. And I would also like to thank everybody else for being here as well. And I'm just going to hold it, it'll be easier. To get us started here, is Representative Menser with us? I don't see her. We are in representation. Is she?
Yep.
Well, there she is. Thank you, Representative Menser, for welcoming us into your district. We are excited to be here. And I also want to turn it over to somebody who has a very unique connection to the district as well, Representative Shannon. You want to welcome us in?
Well, thank you so much, Chair. First of all, I want to say welcome to all my committee members to Sterling Heights. And I want to thank Rep. Menser for welcoming us into her district. And then I also want to thank Sterling Heights High School for allowing us to do this here in their high school. Bit of a connection with myself and Sterling Heights High School. This is where I did my student teaching and had a great experience, and really excited to have our committee here today. This is such a unique opportunity for the community and our constituents to come out and see the work that we do in Lansing and bring it to you on the road. So I'm really happy that Chair decided to do this. I think it's really, the turnout is great, and look forward to a very productive conversation today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. A couple housekeeping items. First of all, I do want to make sure everybody knows we do have a hard stop of 7 p.m. We are guests in this building, and as such, we got to go at 7. So at 7 p.m. will be the hard stop finish. To start off here this evening, I do want to comment that school safety is the utmost important of issues. And as we discussed tonight, it's important to point out that we have been doing a lot of work on this in Lansing. For starters, we had over $200 million in school safety grants. That includes infrastructure, that includes smart internships, it includes mental health supports. But we also acknowledge that there's still so much to do. And tonight we're going to be focusing on that mental health piece. And to start us off here, I would like to welcome up David Mings, who is the Chief Academic Officer for Warren Consolidated Schools. The one on the, yep, that one. The one on your left is hot. Yep.
Thank you, Representative Colazar. I am indeed honored to be speaking to you tonight on behalf of Warren Consolidated Schools and our Superintendent, Dr. Livernois. And obviously today's agenda item is of paramount importance in today's educational landscape. It's no secret that in today's changing educational landscape, the mental health crisis that we face as educational leaders to ensure safety of staff and students is bared upon educational leaders, and the profound impact of the pandemic that we have had to endure cannot be overstated. As such, I've included our district's security wheel, and it is a comprehensive list of initiatives that we cover in our district of Warren Consolidated Schools. It's compromised around 3 main pillars of mental health, safety and security, and staff training. And each one of those initiatives, it allows us to work through any unique circumstances that we have as a district, and it really is the basis of our organization. And behind each one of those initiatives is an overwhelming fully supportive board of education that ensures that we stop at no lengths and empty the tank on safety and security for our staff and students. So with that, I appreciate you having me out here tonight. And it's good to know that the state of Michigan is supportive of the work that we're doing collaboratively because it is of utmost importance in today's landscape.
We do have a question, Representative Glanville.
Hi, thank you so much for being here this evening. I've worked on this topic myself for years as an educator, as a district technology director. Pleased to see Okay to Say is, right up there because that's been, really an important piece, like I said, for years, and how we're reaching our kiddos. I just wanted to ask real quick. I have in my mind a definition for ALICE, the ALICE. Can you just explain that acronym real quick? I'm curious if it's the same that I'm reading.
It is. It's
The asset limited?
Yeah, it's basically your fight or flight response to school safety.
Oh, no, so can you, I'm sorry, that's completely different from what I was thinking. So-
Okay, yeah, it is. It's our safety protocol, and it's alert, inform, and it's basically when you're faced with a decision, you have to make a decision to secure yourself and your students to safety. It's our safety protocol.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Green.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hosting us. I actually grew up 3 miles down the street, and this is my father's alma mater, who grew up just a block over. So thank you for hosting us this evening. I do have a question, since you're a superintendent, and we don't get access all the time to superintendents outside of our own district. Do you have a safety plan in your district? I have a few questions. How often is it updated, and do you fund it yourself?
It's constantly being updated, and it changes with locations, agreements with community facilities that will house us in the event of a major emergency. Yeah, we have a very robust safety plan that is, I would say, updated wholesale-wise every few years, but we're changing it monthly based on new information, name changes, anything like that. And we have 22 schools in our district, so it's comprehensive, to say the least, that we make sure that it is constantly, the information is being disseminated to the school employees that really are the ones that need that information. And yes, we do fund them.
So you, as your school district funded, the state doesn't help you with that assistance in your school safety plan and execution?
We receive state funding for it, yes, absolutely. It goes towards it, but it's all part of our funding.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess my question, again, I hear this microphone's a little tough, so I'm going to be loud. My question for you would be, in terms of going forward, what would you say is the best way that you can continue to be supported from the state, or could be supported in the future that maybe you otherwise aren't being right now?
I mean, money always helps. We need people and we need money. I think some of the conversation you're talking to tonight, the topics that you're talking to this evening, speak to just some of the crunch that we're in as schools when given a bunch of money. The best use of that sometimes is people, and it's tough to find qualified individuals to help lead the charge.
We have another question from Representative Edwards.
I just had a question of clarification. When you say people, what do you mean by that? Like, are you talking about students? Are you talking about social workers? Like, what do you mean by people? Or are you talking about people? Can you clarify that?
Any support staff, teachers, social workers, counselors, school psychologists.
Good. Question. Oh, Representative Weiss.
Thank you. A question about funding. I know in the last budget, we allocated money, 30 AA funding for student mental health, and school safety. We were intentionally left that line item to be a wide range of use to try to give districts a lot of flexibility in those funds to be able to help with staffing and other needs that may vary district by district. Can you talk a little bit about how your district has approached that level of funding and if that was helpful in the way?
The 31 AA has definitely been helpful, and we're continuing to use it up to this day with some of our secondary counselors, our middle school and high school counselors are funded under that. Our school resource officers are funded under that to some degree. And our director of security and crisis, who's a major component of that wheel, we had in August, our Board of Education approved a 3-year agreement with a company called Care Solace that allows our community, our students and families to be connected to mental health supports. And that was funded under 31 AA. So yes, it's been a huge advantage to having that money.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Representative Conlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. I know you have quite a few schools, but do you have some sense of what your ratio is before we start talking mental health, about your school counselors to student ratio?
Yeah, so in our high schools, there's about, I'll say 1,300 students in each one of our 3 comprehensive high schools. There's roughly 750 to 800 in each of our 4 middle schools. And the high schools have 4 counselors at 1,300 kids. Our middle schools have 2 counselors for 800 kids. So you're on about 1 to 300 to 1 to 400 in any given building. And then our elementary buildings each have 1 counselor in all of the buildings. And they run anywhere from 350 kids to 550.
Sorry, I know, and that, I think that falls into what is recommended, like 1 to 400 currently, but does that feel like enough to you?
No.
Yeah.
My wife is a high school counselor as well, and she would tell you, no, it is not enough.
Okay, Vice Chair Green.
Yes, thank you. Another question. Are you familiar with the school safety package that we have in the House? And we have Representative Puri and Representative Young and a few others, Democrats on our side in the House, who have, we talked about the school safety plan, that it would coordinate the plans throughout all the districts, that they would have a similar plan. Do you think that if you had assistance from the state, that would help you execute school safety here, that if there was a standardization amongst terms and coordination with emergency management?
Absolutely. I know we're unique, and we have 3 outstanding police departments within our district. And we do have coordination efforts with all 3 police cities. And, but yes, to your point, anything that we can do coordinated-wise with the state would help.
Thank you.
Giving a sneak peek at future committees. Representative Glanville.
Going back to the ratio for school psychologists or counselors or social work, I'm not sure if they all fall, and I'm sure we'll hear from those groups kind of what maybe some of those designations are, but I'm curious with the lack of staffing that we have in our schools overall, are those folks, is their time honored for the work they're hired to do, or are they asked to do other things like maybe sub in the classroom from time to time, greet the bus, help the kids in and out of school, monitor lunchrooms, things like that? Are there additional responsibilities beyond the scope potentially of a school counselor or psychologist?
Yeah, the great thing is, that anyone that's working in a school, you could really define them as educators, no matter what their label is. And so they're going to do anything to help out. Like they're going to supervise haulers, they're going to, be out there monitoring traffic, if that's what the job calls for. That's what they're asked to do, if that's what they see the need to be. But yes, they're wearing many different hats.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for having us here.
Absolutely, thank you guys for coming out. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have representatives from the Michigan school counselors, school psychologists, and school social workers who are all going to be coming up together. I know we have a PowerPoint as well that is going to get queued up. It's already there. If you don't mind just introducing yourselves, and then the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you so much for having us this evening. I'm Lauren Mangus. I am currently the president-elect for the Michigan Association of School Psychologists. And I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Michigan and a nationally certified school psychologist. And I currently work at Orwell Center for Human Development.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Terry Torzinski. I serve as the president of the Michigan School Counselor Association. I work for a national school counseling consulting company called Hatchet Results. And prior to my role, I'm the executive director there, and prior to my role with Hatchet Results, I was working in education as a high school teacher and counselor for over 20 years.
Good evening.
Oh, feel free to pull that microphone right to you. There you go.
Good evening. Can you hear me yet? Can you hear me yet? No, you can't. Good evening. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time, members of this group. I just want to take a moment, and my name is Dr. Diana Wheatley Haven, and I am a school social worker. I do that every day at New Haven High School, and thank you, New Haven High School, and I'm a member of the Legislative Committee for the Michigan Association of School Social Workers.
So this evening, I know our time
Feel
is-
free to pull the mic towards you
Okay,
too.
sorry, can you let me know there was-
I'm already learning too. You gotta.
Okay. So I know our time is brief here this evening, but we wanted to describe our professional roles individually and collaboratively, and then provide a snapshot of the current mental health needs, as well as exploring barriers, gratitude to you all for the funds and all of your support so far, and then future directions. So all of us have specialized training, much beyond what a traditional kind of master's would be, with a lot of field-based experiences. I don't want to get into the differences in all of our academic careers that are highlighted up here, but we do have a unique skill set that's very specialized and overlapping skill set as well, with continuing professional development for all of our roles. So before we get into our professional roles, I wanted to share with you, we did, about the mental health needs, which I'm sure you all are aware of. Before the pandemic, we were in a mental health crisis. This is data from the CDC and American Medical Association, just kind of capturing the past, kind of present, and kind of where things are going. So the crisis before, we had 1 in 6 youth experiencing mental health challenges. During the pandemic, youth depression and anxiety doubled. So it was already alarming, even more so. And now, nearly 1/3 of students report poor mental health. And 42% of students overall feel persistently sad or hopeless. So we have a lot of needs on our hand, and I know we're addressing the shortage and talking about those things too, but a lot of times our roles are really just intervening with crisis when we really want to work rapidly and preventatively.
So you can imagine with the increasing mental health needs that the pandemic has exacerbated, it is imperative that us as school counselors, school social workers, and school psychologists really work together to promote that positive behavior and mental health wellness. And when we think about our unique roles in doing this, it is imperative that we work collaboratively in those spaces so that we can best meet the needs of our students. You can see here on the slide there are several ways in which we do that, some of which just are assessing and addressing those student emotional developmental needs that are occurring, whether that be for a kindergarten setting all the way up through middle school and into high school. Thinking about what that individual and small group counseling looks like and what is the right type of intervention to support the individual needs that students have throughout the course of their education. And really thinking about how we can be supportive in equipping our students with coping skills, self-awareness, communication skills to really allow them to thrive when they are meeting some of those needs, those mental health needs that they have. Thinking about enhancing student connectedness and belonging, and more importantly, think about who our collaborative partners are outside of the school walls and how those referrals may look to community service agencies as well.
all of us work together to create an environment that is emotionally and psychologically and safe for our students, to give them the capacity to learn as much as they can in every day. As you see by this slide, we have a number of different approaches that are designed to work together to provide I want to say safety net, but that's not quite capturing it. We want to create an environment, a milieu, a place where students always feel safe enough to allow themselves the space to learn. Science has shown us that scared brains don't learn. And if you look at these different circles we have about the different things that we do in our different capacities, you can see that we work hard to develop that capacity for students to develop coping skills and strategies that will help them be successful academically and in life beyond high school and formal education opportunities.
So, as I shared earlier, we shared, all of us, each of our professions bring a unique skill set, but also overlapping skills as well. So when we have a student, we're not just working directly with staff and students within the school through direct and indirect interventions, but we're collaborating with community mental health, our community partnerships, that school community collaboration, and as well as parents and homes. That home-school collaboration is really integral across all of our professions too. So we do a lot of things collaboratively, even through multi-tiered systems of supports, through problem-solving teams, really using data to help us kind of triage where we can allocate our resources. We did want to kind of share a little bit more about our unique skill set, because the kind of around the student captures the overlapping skill set that we share. But for school psychologists, a lot of our training deals with database decision making. We look at a very whole child approach, where we look at academic, social, emotional needs, and behavioral development across the lifespan. So we really look at evaluating through screening procedures, looking at general education students and special education students, and then figuring out how to best meet the needs of students once they're identified. And a lot of our training too makes sure that we do that research and evaluation for programs using evidence-based practices.
It was mentioned earlier, and I think we have a handout as well, in regards to a multi-tiered system of support. When you think about the role of a school counselor, we really like to operate within this proactive, preventative space in which we can meet with students in classroom settings, workshop settings, and things in smaller groups and larger groups as well. And really thinking about how we can best support students in their academic achievement in regards to their social emotional development, as well as their post-secondary options. And I know we're all looking for the chart right here, so I believe it's this is the chart that I was referring to, the triangle.
I have more if you want to. There's so many.
All the papers. And while we're speaking upon that too, just because I know each of us will kind of speak to that tier system of support, really thinking about the foundation of that tier one and what all students need and deserve from a school counselor in regards to those three domains of academic, social emotional development, and post-secondary readiness.
One of the things, as we consider the different school-based mental health professionals, that I think is very critical is that with the overlap of the different professionals, it is very difficult to lose a student, to miss some needs, because we work collaboratively, especially with parents. We keep, in my experience as a school social worker, we recognize the importance of parents and their input and their perspectives with regard to the student, and we help them bridge gaps between what is needed in the schools and what is needed in other spaces. So we provide opportunities for people to come together in support of that student, or all students more accurately. What I think is important is that each of us, as school-based mental health professionals, are on team student every day. And so we want to partner with parents and our teachers and everyone else to support academic success and life success and life skills beyond high school. As you can see, we've got ratios that are recommended, and we have the ratios that are actually happening here in Michigan with regard to student access to school-based mental health professionals. I think a picture is 1,000 words, so I'm not going to say much here. So just take in the slide. But I think I'm going to add something anyway, and I think that I'm going to add is while we're grateful for the steps that have been taken to recognize and deal with the deficit we seem to have with regard to the number of school-based mental health professionals that are out there, it's a start. It's a great start. Let's keep it going and get more people in place to meet the needs of all the students, especially given the trauma that our students and their families experienced with the pandemic. No one was left unscathed.
And just one more thing to add to that too is that a lot of these ratios kind of were best practice before the pandemic. And now with those increasing mental health needs, it just really points out how dire it is for us to be able to do those comprehensive roles, because we're really a lot of times having to kind of manage paperwork and other kind of things that kind of get in the way of the hard work that we want to do each and every day. And really, I mean, there was staff shortages, and time and resources, so the more that we can kind of help mitigate those things, the better. So we do want to extend our gratitude for things that have gone on currently to help attract, prepare, and retaining school psychologists, school counselors, and school social workers because of the significant shortage and allowing us to really perform our full roles. So with the SMART grants, the Student Mental Health Apprenticeship Program for Training and Retention, this has provided and continues to provide hands-on work experiences and practical internship opportunities so graduate students can really go into districts and get paid for those experiences, which previously they were not paid, and really are able to do a lot of the supports and stuff that were discussed earlier to really support that positive climate for students. And then 3102 has really allowed LEAs to hire district school-based mental health providers with funds that do fade out over the course of 3 years. And then 31A, which was discussed previously, providing those additional discretionary funds for LEAs geared toward mental health and school safety, both physical and psychological.
So we're thinking about the future directions of what this means for our profession, what this means for our students, just some things to keep top of mind. You know, as mentioned, those continued funds for the SMART program, as was mentioned earlier, past 2027, as well as the continued funds for 310, as it's been shared prior to us as well, just talking about the increase in number of mental health professionals that have been hired as a result of those funds. So keeping those funding streams alive would be imperative to continue to support our students. Thinking about funding for additional training programs. So we think about our training programs for school social workers, school psychologists, and school counselors. What does that look like, and what are some opportunities to think creatively about some distance learning opportunities so we can broaden our scope and practice in regards to professionals who are entering our field? And then really thinking about how do we creatively attract and retain our professionals that are so passionate about what it is that we do, it almost becomes part of our identity, and how do we keep those individuals in the building that want to do this work that's right by students. And then really just thinking about that continued support in mental health and safety and what is needed for our students and who are the right folks that need to be in the room to help support them. So we do thank you for our time, and hopefully for your time. We hope that you had some good discussion and conversation, and we're open to any other thoughts you have.
Thank you. My first question is to go, you put those ratios on there, and that's startling. So my question is, when we look at that, how do you, I mean, you're working with the most vulnerable kids. How do you cope through that with such a severe shortage? What types of strategies do you use? How do you do it?
I think I'll start. I mean, I'll go back. I had mentioned the tiered system of support prior, and I think that's imperative, especially in regards to meeting the needs of all students. And what is it that every single student is going to get from professionals that are sitting here in front of you? And again, if we can do that in a larger capacity in classrooms, alongside teachers, working with family and community events, and having our reach spread that way, that's helpful, right? That's a start of a foundation of a tier 1 support, and then thinking through the data-driven practices around who are the students who might need additional supports, and how do we identify them in a proactive way as opposed to reacting when they come to us, but we're finding them through some data-driven needs that best align to what they're dealing with.
And then using the data to help create appropriate school climate and culture. And so has, and that speaks to the MTSS, the universal quality of culture and climate, and creating situations that are best for children and environments where they are safe to learn.
And a lot of times that just piggybacking off that goes to school connectedness, because we see that relationships with school, not just school-based mental health professionals, but educators too, can be really pivotal as a protective factor to mitigate mental health needs. And then also too, one thing I want to add is the self-care that's involved for us as mental health providers. That's really critical for educators because there is a lot of burnout. The pandemic has exacerbated that. So it's really also to provide those systems of supports because we can't do it all individually too. There's a lot to manage.
Absolutely, thank you. Representative Weiss.
There we go. I'm glad you just said that because my question had to do with that burnout piece. So, I have two questions actually. First, can you speak a little bit to how having that shortage of mental health professionals in our schools, how that interacts with exacerbating the shortage that we're experiencing with teachers? Because I know from teaching during the pandemic, teachers were expected to do a lot. And even before the pandemic, I had never had, in any school that I worked in, a school social worker or a school psychologist that had the capacity to serve any student that didn't have an IEP because they were just so overwhelmed with just meeting the needs of their IEP students that the general ed students did not have access to a lot of those critical care. So a lot of that falls on the classroom teachers who don't have the training, don't have the experience, but are expected and feel obligated and try to do everything that they can to help meet the needs of their students. And I've seen through watching a lot of my colleagues leave the profession that, at least anecdotally, it seems a lot of that has to do with just being totally overwhelmed and burned out by a lot of those expectations that we keep piling on our teachers. Can you talk a little bit about how through things like getting more people into counseling through things like the SMART internship program that can help address not only the shortages that we have for our mental health supports for students, but also how that could have an indirect impact on other critical shortages that we have in education?
Where do I begin? Excellent question, and thank you for asking. There are so many different pieces that can be helpful. As a person who has hosted interns for the last dozen or so years, giving students an opportunity to learn on the job so that they come into the school setting with a significant awareness of what it means to be a school social worker is very critical. Helping our administrators understand exactly what our roles are and how we can create atmospheres, even under tense situations, that can promote the growth and development of every individual in the building. As we said earlier, no one is unscathed. This pandemic, frankly, messed with all of us. So being compassionate, caring, empathetic, introducing people to our professions in ways that are meaningful, and making sure that everyone has a thorough understanding of what it means to work in a school setting, which is such a unique experience, is, I think, crucial. So as we have more people involved in our profession, it's also important that they understand exactly what it is we do. And again, I think it comes down to helping administrators and other groups come to the table so that we can work together to create environments that support student growth.
I think the other piece, just piggybacking off of that too, is really focusing on teacher mental health as well. Because during the pandemic, we did see through Stress in America surveys of the American Psychological Association, over 80% of adults were reporting significant stress. And so the mental health needs of adults have increased exponentially too. So when we think about development amongst educators included that's really important. So school climate pieces, we really haven't, in my experience in the state of Michigan and having trained students and been in different districts, haven't really looked at screening for social skills, for emotional skills, those kind of things too, to detect if students are having those challenges. So with climate data, with those kind of things, looking at student sense of belongingness, even educator sense of belongingness too is really vital. And to look at all those pieces together systemically, that's one of the things that we do see for best practice.
I'll add just a small snippet, and I just think just collaboration and then empowering and equip one another with how do we best support students. You had talked about the teacher burnout and how real that feels, right? And instead of feeling that we're lone islands trying to address these needs of our students, like how can we collaborate with one another? In each of our roles, we do work directly with students, but we also work indirectly on behalf of students, and that is collaboration with teachers, administrators, family members, and community members alike that can help one another out that way as well.
Yeah. And I apologize, one more piece too. A lot of educators, from what I've kind of gathered, they did a lot of self-care type stuff during the pandemic, nationally and even locally. A lot of people are leaving the profession because they're able to have increased salaries elsewhere and doing things for less stress. So I think, exuding that gratitude, not just financially, but just showing that we see you to educators and that you matter, those things go a long way as well.
Thank you, Vice Chair Green.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. My question had to do with the ratio. So where did those numbers come from? Was it a study? Was it why not more, why not less? I'm just trying to figure out where the numbers for the staff to student ratio is from.
I'll speak on behalf of the school counselors. So it comes from our American School Counselor Association, is the recommended ratio of 250 to 1. It's been that way since that is the recommended ratio since I first started the profession, so I'd have to go back to actually the exact date. On average, across the United States, it's about 1 to 450.
But why, I guess? Why, is that how many, for a guidance counselor, because that's the one who helps us get to college and stuff like that. So that's how many students you can get through during a time period. I'm just trying to figure out, do we need more of you? Do we need less of you? Why that number? And then especially the other two, the social worker and the psychologist, is a little bit of a different, more nuanced care than a guidance counselor does a lot, because usually a lot of schools don't have the luxury of having a psychologist and a social worker as well, so they bear the brunt of all of that. So I guess just why the numbers from that perspective.
From a school counselor perspective, oftentimes what we see is that there are not, elementary school counselors are not mandated in the state of Michigan. And so therefore, a lot of our elementary school students will not have any of these school counselors in their school. You will primarily see secondary, middle school, and high school counselors because they're the ones that are at the end, post-secondary readiness. And those ratios about 1 to 450, but we still have about 40% of our school districts, even in the state of Michigan, that don't even have any school counselors whatsoever.
No, I understand that. Was there a study or research done on how many of you are able to service a student? Am I asking the question wrong?
No, I can speak for school psychologists. So the ratio has changed over time, and because as kind of was addressed earlier, a lot of times the school psychologists were kind of lumped into kind of IEPs and providing special education support and services. But our skills and training go much beyond that. So for us to go through our practice model, which if you look on the National Association of School Psychologists website, all that information is there and what we can do, that ratio allows us to do our full role so that we can work with all students. And I can even speak for myself because I did do my practicum here in more consolidated schools and grew up a little bit up the road. But they did have elementary school counselors during my practicum. And the school counselors did do social skills groups with students, and we're folding into the classroom to support the teachers, really with student development. So really for all of us, those ratios do allow us to work collaboratively and to kind of help more triage and to do the more full comprehensive roles than just be relegated to what kind of things that we end up getting lumped in. So there has been a lot that has gone into that, and that's what we see for best practice. So even on the NASC website, you can see, because there's a whole shortage section, they have gone through every state and looked at the have done that?
The American Association of School Social Workers is responsible for doing similar things as what's been discussed in the previous by my sisters in service. And so it's pretty much, the same drill. They take a look at all the things that we're supposed to do and kind of chunk out how do we get this done in ways that are meaningful. So that's where that data comes from. It's startling, but it's there.
Thank you. Representative Wagella.
I'll try to make sure everyone can hear me. Can you hear me? Okay. So I kind of have a complicated question, so I'll set it up for you. Study after study shows that schools actually are one of the safest places for kids to be right now. And I bring this up because from what I see, I was a teacher, my wife was a social worker, is now a therapist. The data doesn't always support this idea that we have a school safety crisis, but it does, as you've shown today, show that we do have a mental health crisis with students. And I bring this up because, when I was in school, the things that faced kids in terms of safety on a day-to-day basis was how is the school climate, how are things maybe at home, were they being bullied, things of inner conflicts between students. And I think while this debate has moved forward, we've been faced with this question: how do we address this, at least perception that schools might not be safe, and then how do we address the idea that we do have a mental health crisis? So I'm curious, have you in your experience dealt with how does this perception that schools are not safe, or the militarization of our schools as a result of it, affected kids' mental health even more? And how do we move forward in the future addressing the mental health needs without militarizing our schools?
Wow.
Microphone.
Okay. Amazing question. That's the first thing. I think my sisters would agree with me that first step is achieving balance. Unfortunately, there are a lot of factors that go into a perception of how something really is. We can say school is safe. We can do all the things that are needed, that our professions, including school safety professionals, physical safety professionals, tell us that it's safe. But unless a student feels that connectedness and that sense of belonging, it can be very, very difficult to maintain. And how do I say this in a way that makes sense? I think a lot of what kids hear is information that is second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand, social media. Things get repeated and repeated and repeated. And the more we repeat something, the more we have the perception that it's true, whether that's accurate or not. I think that in some ways we need to do a better job of promoting the many ways that we work hard to make sure that schools are safe, and that the state is providing us with opportunities and funding for that safety. I don't think that message gets out enough.
So one of the reasons I asked is because I've been in schools where, in preparation of our school safety plan, I've actually seen schools do competitions to barricade the school classroom door, and whoever could have the biggest barricade won the competition. And I found that had a negative effect on some of my students' mental health. And I think when in reality, when we do look at that schools are already one of the safest places, but we have this mental health crisis, are we in some way or another enhancing that mental health crisis by the way that we approach this conversation and some of the things that we do?
I do think, hopefully that's why when we're in those spaces we can teach and and impact that culture and climate. There's a comment that you had made that was part of your question, and that was the militarize our school, militarization of our school. It is definitely concerning, right? Because that would enhance some feelings of anxiety and angst. And so that is what we're trying to prevent in a proactive way. And so the more that we can enhance that culture and climate of sense of belonging, knowing that our students may not be mentally well 100% of the time, how can we keep it that way in the sense that we all feel safe?
And I think it extends beyond the physical safety, it's the psychological safety pieces, right? So a lot of times it's really important for us to tap into students and how they're feeling, because their perceptions are really what drives the mental health needs. I know for a lot of kids that I do therapy with, it is anxiety about going to school, and when they do see even school resource officers, what does that mean? Is there a threat? Those kind of things too. So it is important to solicit feedback from them as far as their perceptions, because that psychological, perceived safety piece.
Representative Glanville. That's on me. That was on me. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I kind of wanted to follow up on my colleague's comment there, because this is something I've been thinking about for a while too, and I appreciate that COVID, has really brought out a lot of, has brought this issue to the forefront of the mental health of our kids. But having taught in schools, for 20, 30-ish years, for a really long time. Certainly things have changed, and I wonder, kind of a similar question, or something that maybe we as adults didn't respond to quickly enough or don't quite comprehend because it is not our experience in many cases, is this idea of gun violence in our culture and community violence. So I'm pleased to see us working outside of education policy to look at, how what happens outside school affects what happens inside school. And along those lines, I just think about, what is the trauma for our kids and having to even practice an active shooter drill, and the frequency with which they go through that, whether there is a shooter or not, they are made to feel that way, right? And that's just got to be traumatic. I'm a victim of gun violence myself, and just how that can sneak up on you, just in the most, it's trauma, and that's how trauma operates, right? So I just wonder, again, I didn't go through the experience as a kid, so I don't know what that feels like, but I gotta imagine there's an impact on our students there. And then something else that you talked about with MTSS, and so thank you so much for mentioning that. I've done some MTSS training with teachers, particularly in ELL and bilingual ed, and being able to recognize where there might be some, what's the difference between a language difficulty and a learning disability and things like that. And I just want to ask you a little bit about when we talk about school safety. I know, like you said, many people go to that hardening of the schools and how do we protect the kids physically. But the other piece, as you alluded to, is that psychological safety. And one of those things I think might be, what is the role of early intervention in that safety piece, and feeling like people have noticed you, are giving you the attention you need, even if you aren't maybe able to articulate what it is, that's a struggle or something along those lines. So can you talk a little bit about earlier intervention and how that, having those kinds of supports is an impact to student safety and student health?
I want to give them an opportunity to speak, but one of the biggest is school connectedness. That really is the antidote.
Just grab it.
Right on there. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, it wasn't working for some reason. But for the connectedness, that really is the antidote. And it's really about building protective factors. A lot of times we focus on risk factors, but it's really building those protective factors in place in that tier 1, that proactive preventative support, and really helping to enhance student psychological safety and wellness. That really would be a critical piece where we want to go, in addition to looking at that data to support students to see what students are feeling, and then we can kind of triage that way with different interventions and looking, because it's going to look different in different parts of the state with what's needed, so that data can really be telling.
And I would say this kind of alludes to what I said earlier about the elementary school, just early and often, right? Teaching them early and often. And so when we have a lack of student support services in elementary schools in those early stages, and they're not learning those protective factors at those critical developmental stages, that really makes it difficult as they transition from middle school to high school, now trying to equip them with those protective factors that they may not have gotten earlier when they really needed it.
Thank you. Representative Shannon. I just have to get loud.
So I don't have I had a question, but I was glad to see that you had addressed it in your presentation regarding retaining and recruiting. I think it's really important that we have professionals like you in a school setting because it helps to create a positive environment. And to Representative Weiss's thought is that, if you guys are helpful in creating a positive environment in a school, then that is, is reflected when teachers are happy, staff are happy, and so that's, that's how you're retaining and bringing people into the profession. So I appreciate everything that you do, and I hope we can do some things to get those ratios more in line to have an appropriate level of professionals like yourself in our schools. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Representative Johnson.
Music playing here. Thank you. And thank you for all your thoughtfulness, your kind service. Appreciate it. Back in 2005, when I was working in the mental health field until 2017, there was a shortage. We could see the shortage coming. Psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, everyone in the mental health field. During that time, Muskegon, they brought on board local area churches. Those happened to be the religious civic organizations that offered extra help for free. And I know we're at a time where we're looking at funding, we're looking at shortages. To handle this emergency, Kentwood just recently did the same thing in Kent County. Are you open to doing that as well if you had the support from any number of civic or religious organizations in the area that have experienced counselors, social workers, the type of psychological support? They wouldn't even be just brand new from college, sort of experimenting as they learn, but they're very experienced. If you had that available, would you be open to that?
That is a really interesting question. And on its face, it sounds like it might be a good Band-Aid, but there's some caveats I think that are important to consider as we think about something like this. As we've discussed in our remarks today, a school environment is incredibly unique. And as I put out with regard to at least social work interns, we make sure that they're part of the culture and climate of the school. And I think that's important for each of us as school-based mental health professionals, is that we have a unique understanding of the culture and climate of each of our communities from an educational perspective. And that's something that is something that gets taught to people who are doing this in ways that they come into this profession as newbies. I mean, and yes, there is a learning curve, but if you brought professionals in from a different discipline, we still have a learning curve. And so the question becomes, which kind of learning curve do you want to deal with? And then, how long would both of those learning curves last? And the individuals who are bringing them in to learn school-based work already have the vocabulary and the understanding and recognize the importance of culture and climate in this environment in ways that other individuals from other places would have to unlearn and relearn quite possibly.
Possibly, but in an emergency situation where we just can't we can't produce them fast enough, and Michigan has a declining population on top of it all from a number of factors. we may have to find all sorts of remedies that we can just deal with for now, right? It's just one idea.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that for sure, and I think that the thing, because throughout, I mean, especially with the pandemic, we've looked at kind of being reactive to this, and the really important thing is intentionality behind it, and really remembering too that there's local control in each district. So looking at the culture of the surroundings of that community are really critical. So when we talk about school community collaboration, we really need to focus on the collaborative problem solving. So I don't feel comfortable saying like, would we as an organization be open to that, because I don't want to speak for my colleagues that have knowledge of the culture of their own individual districts and areas.
So you would not be open to that?
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm saying that we would be open to conversation and collaborative problem solving with that homeschool and community collaboration.
Okay, thank you. Representative Conlon.
Thank you for your testimony today. When I look at the statistic that nationwide, 1.1 million high school students are attempting suicide each year. That's obviously the ultimate crisis. And I've had a number of constituents sadly face that, and there are no beds in the hospitals, and there's nowhere often for them to go. And a personal friend of mine experienced this in the last 4 weeks. They found a bed, but 3 hours from her home, and that was the closest one. So I'm wondering, are you finding that? Are you being asked then, some of these kids must boomerang back to you if there's no place for them to go? Are you being kind of pushed to almost handle things that should be in a medical facility?
I don't know if I'd go as far as say the things that would normally be handled in a medical facility, but I would say with those scarcity of community supports that may happen, it may fall back on the schools to make sure that student is safe, as well as the families. I think when it gets to that level of care, there's imperative that we bring those families in a collaborative approach to make sure that the student is safe. And when I'm thinking of, your question about the suicidal ideation of our students and thinking about, the potential of different types of supports in the community, I just continuously think about putting reactive Band-Aids on this exasperating crisis that we have. And we can continue to put these Band-Aids at the end of the road of the crisis, or we can think more proactively and preventatively, like how do we do this earlier? You mentioned scared brains don't learn.
Absolutely.
Students that feel safe don't learn. And so instead of investing our time and resources and personnel at the end of the road where it is that mental health, the extremes of suicidal ideation, how can we re-envision education and student mental health supports in a different way that's more proactive?
Yeah, I will say from personal experience, starting graduate school in 2005 until now, I did an internship at the psychiatric hospital at Hawthorne too, and the complex needs of children these days have really just changed drastically, and so it definitely the needs have just become exacerbated. So it's a challenge within the schools and outside the schools. It is all of us together, and that's why the collaborative approaches are so critical for us to really work together.
Thank you. Vice Chair Green.
Thank you, Chair Colzar. So since we have you, a question I get asked all the time is, can you fix bullying? And especially, I know, that's a question, can I fix bullying? Yes, it is a question. And experiencing it as a parent with my own daughter recently has been quite terrifying and traumatizing and I'm coming to the conclusion, you can't legislate bullying, but I would like to get your perspective on, well, one, how can we help you with bullying if that's even possible? And then I believe it also, bullying is having an impact on school safety. And then what can we do to help with that and keep our kids safe? And I'll just let you answer.
The first thing that comes to mind, we've been talking a lot about what we do in terms of the direct services we provide students, but what about, like the empowering of mentorship? When I worked at a high school, we talked about creating a mentorship program in which the students are the ones that are speaking out against bullying, and the students are the ones that are addressing those needs with their peers when they see it. Because it's rampant and it's different than my time with the social media and everything that happens behind the scenes. You know, I used to say to my students, I used to be able to turn it off when I left school. You can't ever turn it off, right? And so when it's harder to turn it off because of all the social media outlets, then how can we empower and equip our students to be better, do better for one another, you know, and think about what our support looks like that way in terms of empowering other mentors and peers to speak up when others.
Does the okay to say, like, or any program, do we have any programs in place that encourage mentoring or those type of programs right now?
There are different peer assisted supports. I mean, any kind of support, peer assisted supports for academics, social, emotional skills, those kind of things can be, resource practices. Yeah, there are a lot of different avenues, but one thing that speaks to the bullying that really does go hand in hand with the climate and that psychological safety piece, and really teaching those pro-social skills for students and how to handle conflict or how to handle just healthy communication with peers. Those things are really critical because a lot of times when we're identifying challenges, it's determining if it's a can do or won't do issue. What we find is that a lot of times students and individuals really struggle with those communication pieces. So if we can work on teaching those directly, that can really be helpful. And I found that too with bullying when I worked in the schools, and even with social aggression, you know, which is a form of bullying too. It's really important to teach those skills and then build that connectedness. So really that tends to be the antidote again, is that connectedness piece.
And I would remind us of what my sister in service said when we do it early and then we reinforce it. So early and often makes a big difference.
Thank you. Representative Legella.
Hi, simple question, at least I think so, but we'll see where it goes. No, my question is this. So I've worked in Title I districts my entire life, and I know that students that come from low-income families or middle-class families need additional support. So my question is, do you believe that when we're looking at ratios of students to counselors to schools, do you think there might be some benefit in having a lower ratio for working class and low-income areas?
No, because I think that the needs look different. I think the needs look different, right? And so oftentimes I know, you know, sometimes we assume or think, you know, because you come from a middle class families that are working and parents are still together, that's not a need that you all have. But what I see are different needs, you know. And so when we think about ratios, just disaggregating those ratios in regards to low income versus not low income, I think we might then be creating another part of the challenge of need that sometimes from a student population that we assume they're okay. We assume that they're all right. And then when you see those suicidal ideation rates, where are some of them coming from?
That's been my experience too, because I did work in Fitzgerald Public Schools, which is in Macomb County as well, a lot of Title I, and in Bloomfield Hills as well as the school psychologist. And there's just needs across the board with respect to mental health. But of course, whatever we do for ratios and really having more support staff too can be really vital to whatever those needs look like.
Okay, we have one final question. Representative Glanville.
I wanted to briefly comment on this, having worked in Title I and then also in some volunteer districts. I understand that idea that the needs are just different. The pressure that some of those kids from a higher socioeconomic area feel is just overwhelming in different ways. And then I wanted to go back to this idea of bullying. Again, having worked as a technology director, I also worked as part of that industry, internet safety training across the nation. Working, and I think we need to, you know, one of the things we talked about also that Rep. Weiss mentioned was just the amount of expectation we have on teachers and schools to do all of this work when really when we think about pro-social social media use, it starts in the home. And the more that we can, you know, educate parents and communities around the elements of not just social media, but internet, you know, interactions that kids have from a very young age and how that impacts them. I think looking outside of our schools again to the resources that are available for parents and families, and not necessarily rely on the school to provide all of that. When again talking about this mental health difference, parents are anxious because they don't know how this works, and they're getting there, right? Our oldest millennials are now, they grew up in this, so they kind of get it, right? But for others, that's just not the case. And so just thinking about how we can get those programs, get communities involved in those. And I know the organization that I worked for, they still exist. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about them. But we had partnerships with local police, state police, schools, private, public, charter, across the board. And the programs were very well received, and they were leveled K-12, K-2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, on up. So they were age appropriate, that sort of thing, and then talking directly to parents as well. So, how we can do that better outside of our schools.
I agree, and it just, how do we think more creatively about how we engage our families is critical. It just looks different, and we cannot rely on archaic practices and how we engage our families 20 years ago, because our families are different. And so how can we be creative in how we reach them?
I want to thank you, not just for coming here today, but for all you and your members do for Michigan's kids. Thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you so much.
And next up, we have the principal of Chippewa Valley High School, Todd Distorath.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. As was just mentioned, I am the principal of Chippewa Valley High School. I'm in my 20th year as an administrator at both the middle school and the secondary at the high school level. I'm also the representative for this county on the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals, so speaking for all the principals here in our county. We had a lot of time to listen to our mental health professionals, which is great because I'm going to definitely speak to the importance of those people within our school to support us. Earlier, the 31AA money was mentioned. Just my school district, using that money, hired 2 additional counselors at the high school level, an additional high school social worker, 2 staff members, a behavior interventionist at the middle school level, and 1 behavior analyst at the elementary school level. So all those positions, along with contracting with the company Alliance, which provides additional outside support. So all of that help. The ratios, we've talked a lot about ratios today. We went from 1 to 350 to 1 to 300 with that additional counselor that we received in our building. So it makes a big difference. When you look at, we have over 2,200 students in our school, and each of those is an individual with individual needs, and our counselors have to not only help them with their mental health, but right now they're meeting with every student individually just for scheduling. And scheduling by itself is a huge job. What are the students' goals and dreams? What are their EDPs say? Making sure we work through that process. Are they a CTE student? Do they know the CTE programs that we offer? We offer many. Do they want to take AP classes? We offer many of those. So there are just so many choices and selections just with scheduling. And then you get past scheduling, what's after high school, and helping them reach those benchmarks, and helping them with scholarship applications and FAFSA applications, and applying to a college or a post-secondary opportunity. So we're doing all that work before we even get to mental health, right? And then the mental health aspects we've talked a lot about today. We talked about the normal stresses that teenagers have, the stresses that you and I had, and then now it's phones and social media on top of that. So we're dealing with constant situations. And we are seeing, when I talk to my counselors, additional suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. My own experiences this year, just being in the hallway, I have broken up a fight. I have had students come to me in tears. My friend is cutting. And so where do I take that student when I find that student? I take that student to the counseling office, right? I walked into the counseling office one time this year, and the student was with a counselor, with her parent, and yelling about wanting to kill herself. I mean, that's an awful thing that you can walk into at any time in a school. And so our counselors are dealing with those kinds of situations along with everything else. So it's a big job. It's a really big job. The fights, the bullying, you mentioned bullying, and the way we try to prevent those things is with more people. The more connections that we can make within our building, the better. So just that ratio of 1 to 300 versus 1 to 350 makes a difference. We can have more connections to kids. A kid that is in need can see an adult. It's just so important. And the stories that I just told you, they happen all the time. We did 2 threat assessments today in our school for things that come up. So that's a new reality, because kids make bad decisions about what they say, and now that's an emergency that we're dealing with, and it's because of the stresses that they're going through in their lives. So I wanted to paint that picture for you today of kind of what we're experiencing right there on the front line in the school, and to really drive home that point how important the people are that we have in our schools. And just to again reinforce that, MASSP, the organization that I'm a part of, reached out to all the principals in the state and asked them what are their priorities. The top priorities in responding to that: state funding to recruit and retain mental health staff, number 1. Expand access to on-site behavioral health services for students. So those are the top needs. Where is more support needed? Community mental health, school mental health staff. Those are the top needs. And again, to just reiterate, I think it was said earlier, the struggle to fill positions is real. We're pretty fortunate where I am. We just hired a counselor, but a lot of the applicants were already current counselors in other schools, so we kind of benefit from that. But somewhere on the trickle down, there's somebody's running out of an option there as far as people available. So we didn't have a lot of new applicants for our position, so that is definitely a need. So I again appreciate the opportunity. Your jobs are hard. There's so many things that you're considering today, and more outside of this. But just keep in mind the importance of what we're dealing with in our schools. So, any questions?
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I have a question. We oftentimes hear a lot of talk in Lansing about various new technologies that have come up to help with student mental health. Maybe a wellness check that then, if a student isn't doing well, it actually sends a report to the counselor that they can fill out confidentially, things like that. I'm curious if you use anything like that at Chippewa Valley.
We don't have anything specific that you are describing there. I mean, we do try to access, even just scheduling an appointment with the counselor is probably the biggest use of technology as far as that goes. It's easy, they scan the QR code and they get in that way, so that helps us. But, I know our counselors will share individually when they're working with a student, they share apps and different tools that are available.
Thank you. Representative Weiss.
Thank you for your testimony. In hearing your testimony and some of the other testimony today, it's become really clear to me, and from my own personal experience, that school culture and climate is so critical for students' academic success, for their mental health, safety, well-being. It really is so important for ensuring that students feel safe, that they belong, and that they get everything that they need to get out of school. We know that, unfortunately, for years, we've been underfunding our schools in Michigan, particularly since around 2011, 2012. We've really cut a lot of funding for education supports in schools that has really decimated the ability for schools to be able to hire and retain both teaching staff and also support staff and mental health staff in schools. Now that that's kind of changed and we have redirected and we're reinvesting back into schools and trying to get that staffing back up, we also know that that is going to take time. And are there things that you have seen as a principal, the recent policy that we've passed, either budgetary or other policy, that you think will help to help with that recruitment to get more people into the profession? Because to your point, if you hire a new counselor but they come from another district, that's good for your district, but that's not helping the overall issue. Even if you hire a counselor and they come from a behavioral health clinic for the community, then that's one less person who's doing community behavioral health. So how do we get more people, or do you have any ideas of things that we've done and that we could do better to get more people into those professions?
Great question. I don't have an immediate answer.
No, close to the mic.
I don't have an immediate answer for that question. When I think about it, we talked a lot today about the challenges in education, right? And is this a place that people want to go into as a career and a profession? And I don't want to get, down the road of pay and everything and all of those things, but that is part of it, right? And just the profession itself and the respect, or maybe lack of respect, the profession receives, right? There's a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of pressure from everybody. Like, everybody went to school, and so everybody's an expert about school, right? Even though it's a little bit different than it was when we went to school, that's not even accurate. It's a lot different than it was when we went to school. So I don't have the answer other than to say that we do need support to recognize the difficulty of the job and to, celebrate as much as we can the accomplishments of the job.
Thank you. Representative Johnson.
Test. So, thanks for all your hard work. You mentioned that we have a tough job. No, you have a tough job. I want to ask the question, who do you think is ultimately responsible for the mental and moral development of a child, of a student? Is it the teacher, the school, or is it the parents?
I would say it takes all of us together, working together as a team and reinforcing each other. If anybody in that group is not doing their part to help students, then we all fall short and the student suffers. So yeah, we need parents to be the best parent that they can be, and parenting is a difficult job, and we need teachers to be their best as well. And that's a challenge too, because in addition to filling in all the gaps that we've talked about today, they're also trying to teach them math and science and social studies. And just that all by itself is a huge challenge. But just to answer your question, I really do think the partnership between home and school is hugely important.
I really appreciate that. This may not be going on in your school, but increasingly across the state of Michigan, we all get phone calls from parents who are finding out that their children are being told at school, and again, this might not be your school, but they're being told things like, well, we're just going to have that conversation here and keep it from your parents. If that really happens, wherever that happens, do you think that causes added stress to the student when they're at school?
It's hard to picture that. Like, I've never heard a statement like that. Like, that's never been reported to me that a statement like that's been made. So it's hard to picture exactly what you're talking about there, but yeah, I guess I would say confusion if, hey, don't tell. I think you're suggesting that an adult school would say, don't tell your parent about something. So I think that would be confusing. But like I said, I haven't experienced that, so it's hard to put it into an actual context.
I'm so glad you haven't experienced that.
Somebody.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony today. We only have 5 minutes left, so I want to get to Cheryl Kennedy from the Michigan Department of Education. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you for what you do.
Let's see how good my reach and my juggling of technology is here. Hello, and thank you, Rep. Pelizar, and the committee for this opportunity to testify today. My name is Dr. Cheryl Kennedy. I'm the legislative liaison. I'm looking for a slide. I'm the legislative liaison for the Department of Education, and I'm honored to speak to you today about the school counselor shortage in Michigan. Oh, sure. Maybe I'll do this. Oh, there it is. As you know, nationally, we have faced a school professional staffing shortage, including school counselors for several years. According to recent surveys, the shortage occurred for a number of reasons, including poor salaries, fewer benefits, increased pressure, and a negative professional work environment in schools. The current members of the legislature did not create this issue, but as most of these negative changes were legislative in nature, it is now your responsibility to help correct the issue. And you have been doing yeoman's work in this area, especially through the budget and continued investments in education. The Michigan Top 10 Strategic Education Plan, which you see here, approved by the State Board of Education in August 2020, contains necessary goals to improve educational opportunities for Michigan's 1.4 million public school students. As you can see, the Michigan Top 10 Strategic Education Plan, Goal 7 is to increase the numbers of certified teachers in areas of shortage, and Goal 3 is to improve the health, safety, and wellness of all learners. Increasing the number of school counselors falls into both of these goal categories. I'm here to share our progress toward these goals and then follow up that discussion by providing suggestions regarding the work we need to continue until the school counselor shortage is resolved and children's mental health needs are being addressed fully. A number of those you've already heard this evening. Regarding Goal 7, to increase the number of certified teachers in areas of shortage, first, we have some good news. Although teacher preparation enrollment decreased significantly beginning in 2011, we have recently rebounded with a 56% increase in teacher preparation enrollment. Not only do we have more teachers in the pipeline, we have increased the diversity of those teachers to better serve all students, regardless of race or background. The U.S. Department of Education has reported that for the period of May 2019 to September 2023, Michigan ranked second highest in the nation in education and job recovery. Among only 7 states to have increases in education staffing, this slide shows that Michigan is on the right path to addressing staffing shortages throughout public education. Additionally, investments recommended by MDE, approved by the state legislature, and signed into law by the governor, including scholarships for those in educator preparation programs, grow your own programs for students, and support staff who aspire to be teachers, student teachers, stipends, loan repayments, and funding for mentoring, among others, have begun to help rebuild and strengthen our educator pipeline. As I previously mentioned, the third goal of the strategic education plan is to improve the health, safety, and wellness of all learners. Again, we have moved the needle significantly in this area in good measure as a result of your investments. Specifically, the governor and the legislature have provided $328 million in per pupil payments to school districts for mental health and safety needs. You have heard this over and over and over again, 31AA. However, the current budget, these dollars were non-recurring. We know that for districts to invest prudently in staff, they need to know that the money will be there year over year. The current executive recommendation would make recurring half of these funds associated with public schools. The Michigan Department of Education believes these recurring funds need to be protected and expanded throughout the year.
And look at that. Dr. Kennedy, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
If you did submit a card, we do have them and they will be put into the official record. If you are still holding onto a card, you can bring it to the clerk and she will make sure we put it in the official record. And Representative Churches moves to excuse absent members without objection. Absent members are excused, and there being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.